In this episode, you get to hear two different perspectives. One from Grace, a student in Drexel's Food and Hospitality Management Department who was a freshman in the spring of 2020 when the lockdown first began, and one from Paul, one of Grace's professors in the department and a longtime friend and colleague of mine. I checked in with them this past week to see how their fall semester has been going. And Grace said not only has it been completely flying by, but it has been so nice to be back in person. Grace and I met over the summer through last week's guest, Lauren Westerman. Grace has continued her student involvement with NACE, the National Association for Catering and Events. The NACE student program is running the next NACE Philly event, a 2021 wrap-up party at Reading Terminal Market on Tuesday, December 14th. For tickets and more information, visit nacephilly.com. In this episode, I explain how I got involved with the hospitality program at Drexel while I was working at Flying Fish, which led to my participation with the Philly Chefs Conference, as well as eventually teaching fundamentals of beer for a few semesters. Well, technically a few quarters, since Drexel is on the quarter system. I absolutely love teaching, and as I mentioned in my intro for Ben Torsey's episode, I'll be making the return to campus as an adjunct professor. Starting in January, I'll be teaching 2 classes in the education department at Temple University, leadership and organizations and team processes. I'll be dedicating 2 days each week for academia and the other days for being MG, the venue specialist. I always thought a return to teaching would be in the hospitality field, but the universe opened another door and I am excited to walk through it. I'm so grateful to have been able to interview and learn from Lauren, Ben, Grace, and Paul about their experiences dealing with the education system and COVID. With the recent announcement of the new variant, I asked Paul about the current plans for the Philly Chefs Conference, currently scheduled for late February of 2022. He said, as of now, the conference sits on the island of misfits plans, hoping for the best case scenario. We are still on and we'll be making an announcement soon, but nothing formal at this time. Recently, I read a tweet that said, we thought COVID was going to be The Wire or another show that ran for 5 seasons, but instead we're dealing with Grey's Anatomy. It's funny, but it's sad and infuriating all at the same time. As always, thank you so much for listening and enjoy the following episode, Setting the Table, a virtual lesson in hospitality with Paul ONeill and Grace Schuler. My guests today are from my alma mater, Drexel University. I've got Paul ONeill, Assistant Clinical Professor in the Food and Hospitality Management Department, and one of his students, Grace Schuler, whom you're just about to start your pre-junior year at Drexel, correct?
Yes, my third year.
Grace and I just got the chance to meet over the summer at a NACE event that the National Association for Caterers and Event Professionals that Lauren Westerman, who is also a guest on season 2 of Beyond the Venue podcast, is very involved with, and you ended up interning with Lauren for your very first co-op. And
Yes.
So we'll dive a little bit more into the insanity of probably working with a event planner and wedding coordinator doing a co-op during a pandemic. And then Paul, we've known each other for quite some time. When I was at Flying Fish back in the day, the owner of Flying Fish had gotten his MBA at Drexel, and I had gotten my undergrad there. And I know that he started doing several partnerships. I know, like doing events and pop-ups and things with the hospitality and culinary program. And so it's kind of like, oh, MG, like, you're our Philly sales rep. You went to Drexel. Like, you want to do some of this stuff? I'm like, absolutely. So I started getting involved and met a lot of you and the other professors and the chefs, and ended up attending the very first Philly Chefs Conference that we'll dive into more details later, but really got to spend more time with everyone. In between years 1 and 2, you decided to put together a committee to try and improve how the conference was going to be in year 2. So that was a lot of fun, because showing up in a conference room at Drexel, you, several other, casting characters from the Drexel community, but also getting to spend time with Kevin Spraga and Emilio from Schuler Brothers. Yeah. And that was the very first time I got to meet Emilio. This guy is a character. Again, not knowing that sitting in that room, I'd eventually be working for both of you at some point in my career. Life always comes full circle. And I joke that that's why I'm nice to everybody, is because you never know who you're going to meet or work for.
Absolutely. Keep the bridges intact.
Never burn them down. Never burn them down. Never. So I'm just super excited to get to talk with you guys today, because when I first met Grace, it's like, oh, you're in the program. Is Paul ONeill still around? Is he still teaching? And he's like, oh yeah. I was like, I have to have y'all both on the show, because I thought it would be such an awesome experience to get the insight of a university student as well as a professor, especially one in the hospitality field where, you're teaching about food and you're teaching about beverage, and how the hell do you possibly do that virtually? So we're just going to dive right into all of this. So, what have the last 18 months kind of been like for both of you?
Oh, you can go.
Grace?
You're like, I'm going to need a drink for this.
I can go if you,
Yeah, great. So I'd like to start with the student perspective.
Okay. So obviously I started my freshman year and I was living in the dorms because I'm from Maryland. So I was living in the dorms, and March comes around, and that's when spring break is. So we get like an email, and it's like, hey, like this virus is going around. So we're going to like start your spring break early. Your final exams are going to be online. So I'm like, okay, cool. Final exams online. Like, I don't mind that. So we go home for spring break, and then they're like, okay, we're going to extend it for a few more weeks. And we're just like, okay, a few more weeks, an extended spring break. Love that. And then as we're like coming back from like almost done with spring break, they're like, yeah, you're moving out. Like, you got to take all your stuff and you're moving out. So we basically come back to Philadelphia, and we have to move all of our stuff out of our dorms. And so from that point on, like for my freshman year, at least for 5-year students at Drexel, you get your first summer off. So my first summer off, I was looking for like a job within the hospitality industry, just because like I love to continue working in the industry. But it was hard with COVID because obviously like everything was shut down. So that summer I kind of just hung out with family and friends, and just got like much needed like relaxation after school and stuff like that. But the whole spring semester was online. So that was definitely different because it was like our teachers and our professors, they were trying to navigate online, and so were we. So it would be like we were kind of struggling with one another, because it was like some professors didn't know what to do, and then some students didn't know what to do. And also like the whole mental health aspect of it, like some kids didn't really want to be home, whereas some kids like were thriving at home. So that all passed, had summer, and that was good. And then I'm like, okay, well, maybe we'll be in person. Like my brother and I moved back to Philly because we had signed a lease, and then we were all online again. So my whole entire sophomore year was online again. And I was kind of the thought process of, if I can't take any of the classes I like, I'm going to take all the classes I have to take online, because it's just like, I don't want to take like Paul's fun class, or like
All
this
those
like fun
prereqs
garden
out of the
class.
way.
Yeah, like, I don't want to take like this fun class that I could be outside in the garden like while during COVID, and like while I have to be online. So I just got all my prereqs out of the way, which I think was a good decision, but it was like mentally draining, because it was like you weren't really getting to do anything that you wanted to do, or like learning anything that you really wanted to learn, or seeing the professors that you really like learned from. So that was my whole sophomore year. And then trying to find a co-op, that was also an interesting experience, because there weren't too many options, like because of COVID and stuff like that. So I had to go outside of the system, and that's when I found Lauren. So that was like a little bit of my like school experience. And Paul, you can kind of tell yours, and we'll get into the nitty gritty of everything else. But that was my school experience.
And you were, so, for our listeners that aren't familiar with the Drexel quarter system, it's a year-round school program where if you do decide to do the 5-year 3 co-op program, which I did as a marketing major as an undergrad, which taught me cubicles and corporate America are the worst. You go to your freshman year and your senior year are 3 quarters, and then the summer off, but you either are on fall winter co-op or spring summer co-op, and the other 2 quarters you're in school. So I guess, Grace, you were on spring summer co-op, so you were in online classes for fall and winter, and then did your co-op for the spring and summer quarters, and now you're going to be going back to now in-person classes coming up for your fall quarter.
So it's definitely like an intense program, just because your classes are a lot faster, and you have like kind of like more of them in a sense, because you're basically taking like I think it's like 183 credits, when at like a normal college, like when you have summers off, like you might be taking like 150 or like 130 or whatever the case is. So you're just taking a lot more than other students. And then you also don't get that like break off, but you do come out with like 3 years of work experience. So that's what really drew me to Drexel, because I was like, I'm going to get all this experience and it's going to be a lot of fun. And obviously, like COVID has kind of challenged that, and trying to navigate that as like someone who plans has been like difficult at times. So yeah.
Yeah. I think to piggyback on that too is, you know, which I'll talk about a little bit, but you know, that experiential component, how do you do that on an online scenario? And, you know, so much, you know, so many buzzwords that came out of the year, Blur's Day, you know, things like that.
What
But
word?
pivoted, Blur's Day.
Blur's Day. 18
You didn't
months
hear,
and I
you
have not,
missed that
nope,
one.
Nope,
Yeah,
I missed that one.
That was like, what day is it? What day is it again? It's Blur's Day.
Because
Don't
I've
even know.
experienced that on a regular basis, which is why I will type out the entire, you know, Wednesday, August 25th, 2021 at, you know, 1 p.m. Eastern Daylight Savings Time.
Yeah.
I'm very explicit. Blur's
That's
Day.
good.
I love
That's
that.
good. Yeah, there were some moments where it was definitely a lot of Blur's days, but one of the terms that I know was overused besides unprecedented was pivoting, right?
Yep.
So everybody had to pivot, but it's the truth. It's about adaptation and pivoting, and there was a lot of that, like on the fly. Costs and benefits, you know, the costs of, or the, what I should say, the drawbacks of being an experiential college or university and having to figure out how we do this online. You know, there were drawbacks for sure. Like we literally can't be there in person. Whereas some of the benefits were like we had to rethink, and it's all shifting. So we have to adapt or die, right? We have to go with it and figure it out. So,
what classes were you slated to teach in the first spring of 2020?
So
that would have been your first experiment of going virtual.
Yeah. That was fun. Yeah. So just like Grace had said, and interestingly enough, so not only am I with Drexel, of course, full time, but I'm also, on the board of, I'm on the board for Philly Wine Crew, which is formerly Philly Wine Week, and we've just changed our name from Philly Wine Week to Philly Wine Crew. And that is we had just had a board meeting the Wednesday, was that the 11th? Wednesday the 11th?
Of
10th,
March?
I think it was, of March, right before shutdown. And we were because we were supposed to have our opening corks on March 29th, the end of the month. And we were like,
okay.
And, you know, we always plan it. We take into consideration, you know, NCAA, we take into consideration Lent, any other holy holidays around that time, you know, we have to take into consideration. So we always try to nail it to where it's not, the opening of corks event is not on there. So I had taken up the duty to call the Philly Board of Health, and she didn't even have an answer, but basically said, I can't tell you no, that we're going to lock down, but I can tell you that it's not looking good. So we had to call it there. And then sure enough, Friday came along, we had our last lunch class, and it was like, I'll see you when I see you. And
Yep.
Little did we know. But yeah, so I ended up teaching, right, we had to pivot, and we put all of our tests online that we had. Some of the classes that I don't do tests in, it was fine already, the portfolios or whatever the case may be. But then that spring term, we had some classes that were supposed to be done in person in a lab setting that we had to revisit and rewrite. One class in particular was fine dining, that we normally do a number of different events and dinners that we have people come in. I teach service protocol. Chef Brad Daniels, who was teaching adjunct for the kitchen counterpart class, we had to develop a class on the fly because there were seniors who needed that to graduate. And so we had to come write a brand new class, basically centered on like fine dining principles and cooking, and just going through the history of fine dining and interviewing fantastic people. Emilio was so great to join us one day. He's like, man, it's just great. You know, I didn't know what to expect, but like, this is just great to see people, you know, and he was just so excited. And he's the best, either virtually or in person, of course. It was really great.
His personality's so big, it translates whether virtual or in person, for sure.
He's like, yeah, I just hope I bring enough to the table. I was like, I'm not worried. But you're funny. You're funny that you think you're not going to be able to do this, but that's cool. So thankfully, we were able to navigate through that. I was also teaching wine, so I had to, you know, the big component of that class is teaching people how to taste and what they should be looking for. And we normally, in a classroom setting, are tasting upwards throughout the term, somewhere in the area of like 60 to 70 different examples of wines. So I'm not having students purchase that much wine. I'm certainly not going to distribute it. So like, how do I do that? So I came up with different ideas. I said, you know, if you want to be a part of the tastings, sign up for at least 5 of these, and that's what you'll be. And of course, I made it so they were accessible. I forget what I said in the emails, like text examples, accessible, and affordable. That was like my major thing. So it was under the amount that they would normally spend in the lab materials fee for the class, and then we could still do it in person. And that I found was probably when I did beer and I did wine throughout summer, fall, and winter 21.
So you did give them a shopping list to go
Absolutely.
and make the purchases themselves, and they were trying it at home. But
Right.
I guess were they able to share the bottles? Like, was that an option of like maybe breaking up into groups? And
so there were a few instances in some of the classes, because I had upwards in my one beer class, I think I had 40 people at one point, which was a lot to try to rein in. But there were some people that were actually living together already. Like they just were on campus together. So that was helpful that they were able to do that. Some people are like, I don't really drink wine. What am I supposed to do with the rest of this? So you had to rethink that. Like, okay, maybe I'll offer the option of splits and doing the smaller format bottles and stuff like that. So it definitely required a tremendous amount of tweaking. However, that's, you know, as much as people lamented the fact that they were losing that tasting component in the class, a lot of people take it for that reason. I don't know why. But they talked about the fact that that was probably their favorite aspect, was actually just getting together and having candid conversations on Zoom. You know, we didn't have to, there was all those, you know, Zoom things like life hacks, like how to cover up alcohol during business meetings, put it in the coffee cup, right? We didn't have to do that. We literally were in class, like tasting, and it was fine. So, but you know, that combined with, you know, I have 3 children. My oldest was in 3rd grade, and the twins were in 1st grade. So keeping the kids occupied, keeping 1st grader twins occupied while working from home. My wife is in healthcare. She's a pediatric nurse anesthetist. So she, of course, was going through her issues. Thankfully, the pediatric side wasn't as affected as much as most of the other hospitals. But yeah, there were a lot of challenges to navigate. And, you know, I felt badly when I would tell the twins to sit back down. Like, we're doing a scavenger hunt. Like, oh, sorry.
I think there's a lot of, it sounds like there's a lot of parents that, you know, prior to the pandemic would have been a little bit more resistant with screen time and, you know, limiting that with their children. And I think that completely went out the window.
Totally. And that's the thing. And that's the thing. Every childhood specialist is no screen time, no screen time, no screen time. And you better we got to do screens.
I keep them entertained. So, and you know, how did you end up bringing in any additional help, or were you having to help the kids with their schoolwork as well as teaching like all of your classes? Or
we were able to coordinate with another family with whom we were very close. We are very close with that. We were able to develop a pod scenario.
Awesome.
Being very, you know, they actually were very mindful and very careful about, and yeah, we were able to at least do that. So it gave me 3 hours to at least maybe sit down and do something or like focus on some of my work. The twins didn't fare as well in the pod situation, so they ended up coming back.
Bunch of
But at least
rascals.
they really are. Yeah. They're fun. But so from a professional, personal standpoint, I would say, there were times where I would it was challenging for everybody. Everyone has their pandemic story, right? It's like with the 20th anniversary of September 11th coming up, everyone has their story of where they were on 9/11. It's like, well, yeah, like especially when they say things like, man, it was really messed up. Like I was like, what? And I was like, yeah, me too. Like we all have our pandemic stories that it was challenging for everybody. And
It's a collective trauma that's still ongoing.
Yes,
And
yes.
I think that's one of the most infuriating parts is that it can't quit. Like it just keeps going. And, I'm guessing your kids are probably going back to school in person and,
Yes.
you're physically at Drexel right now teaching classes in person this summer and will continue to do so for the fall. But I mean, I do know that the mandate is, I think by October 15th, every single staff, faculty, student at Philadelphia colleges and universities must be vaccinated. So
Right.
hopefully that helps, but I know that's still 2 months away. So
Right. And by that point, I'll probably be in line for the booster at that point because that'll be around the 8-month period. I was very fortunate. I also was diagnosed with asthma during the pandemic. So I was like, oh man, do I have it? I haven't gone anywhere. I mean, my hair, this is short compared to where my hair was getting at one point. It's pretty gnarly. And yeah, I was like, man, do I have it? What's up with my lungs? And then of course you go to the asthma specialist and they're like, are you short of breath? Yes. You can't come in. Why? Your asthma. Because you're showing signs of COVID. I'm like, I'm showing signs of asthma. Yes, there's an intersection there.
Did you have to come with a negative COVID test in order to?
I had to get swabbed a couple times. Like I had to, so the little brain tickle and
asthma diagnosis. That's got to be so infuriating because I know there's definitely been jokes made about, okay, now we're back into, is it allergies or COVID season? And I know a lot of my friends have been experiencing that where they've actually gone to get tested. So even though we've all been vaccinated since May, that, what sore throat, sneezing, you just don't know that.
Right.
Better to be safe than sorry. It's, well, let's talk about the Philly Chefs Conference. I know, so this was something, I was super excited to get involved in. And at the time it was bringing in folks from the hospitality community from all over, different panelists and discussions. And it was a mix of, current Drexel students, as well as, anyone from the hospitality community in Philadelphia. And it was just such a super awesome thing for me to be a part of and to have been able to meet just so many interesting, amazingly talented people from the region. So, what of the last, obviously you didn't have one 2020, or did you do one virtually, or
Nope.
was it, let's just stop it right there.
Yeah. We, so the Chef Conference is something that, first of all, Michael Trout is, he was tasked, I shouldn't say tasked, maybe presented with the opportunity to put something together. And, he, after speaking with a number of different people, kind of generated this idea. This was back in 2013 when I was still teaching adjunct and I was still working at Vetri at the time. And both Mike and I worked within the Vetri organization. So actually Mike and I have been working together now almost 15 years, and from restaurants to here. So he was instrumental in putting this all together, kind of presented with it in December and put it together in just like 3 weeks. And it was that January, and he considered a couple of different things. Mondays in January, especially after the holidays, being very slow for the restaurants. So therefore we can have people come in. And the whole idea was to have the restaurant community, the hospitality professionals, to have a place to come in and just to talk about things, whether it be part TED Talk, whether it be part moderated panel discussions with other professionals, demos, how to break down a whole hog, how to butcher, how to work with this product, featuring other pastas, whatever. And from that time of January 2014, it's just every year it's been able to evolve into something more, and we've been able to get better, I shouldn't say better, but bigger names and more. I mean, the fact that we're getting more international names. We've had, people coming in from Copenhagen and Australia and Chile, Peru. I mean, it's crazy to think of where it started and where it is today. And it's great too, because they're our best ambassadors. The people that have done it, they get to go out and say, you got to see what they're doing. Or they'll say, you got to get in touch with this person. Here's their contact. They would love to do this. They're the people you want to have here.
Did it stay?
We were thinking that too. Yeah, good idea.
Did it stay in January? I know you moved it to March.
We moved it to March.
So were you able to
started to worry.
In 2020.
We did. We were able to be the last major event of 2020. It was February 20. Was it a leap? No, it wasn't leap year.
It was leap year. My first clients got married on February 29th of 2020.
It was a leap year. It was 29th and March 1st. Yep. Mm-hmm. And we were able to get it in. And actually, Chef Kwame Onwachi from DC had his mask. And, we've seen them on campus before. Students who are primarily from Asian countries will have them on. It's part of their culture. When they're sick, they don't want to spread it. So you would see it around campus with people wearing masks. But Chef Kwame was one of the first, and he came up to the panel. He kept the mask on and was talking. We're like, does he not take the mask off? Of course, at the time, being so naive, and and it wasn't a part of everyday life at that point. So,
and it wasn't.
Yeah, there were a lot of weird things.
It took a couple weeks too. Like even when there was the lockdown, it was still we weren't told to start wearing masks until probably April.
Right. We couldn't even find them too, right? Nobody could find masks. Remember the toilet paper shortage? I mean, like the things that come back to you, like, oh my God, I forgot about that.
And they're like, we have gotten through 18 months of this. Like, this is badass that because it's not been easy. And
no, I mean, we got to learn about Carol Baskin. We got to learn about a whole lot of interesting things. But I mean, it's crazy when you think about like, oh my God, that was 18 months ago.
That's how it started.
Yeah.
It's like
that's how it started.
How it started and how it's going.
Murder hornets. I mean, like, it was all happening.
Man. Well, Grace, I'm curious. Were you able to attend the chef's conference then? Like your first and only thus far?
Yeah, that was my first one. So I think I visited the campus like 2019 afterwards, and they gave me like the little swag bag. But it was my first time attending in 2020, and I really liked it. Like, it was a lot of fun. I had never really like attended an event in our like smaller space. So it was very chaotic because it is like a smaller space. But it was a lot of fun.
I was always impressed with the logistics. Like to get it done.
So the Drexel students, like we were like mostly working the whole time. But it was like, I always enjoy that kind of stuff. Like I always like going to that kind of stuff. Like I remember Paul and we had a conversation afterward. Like I think it was after because there was a Philly Chef conference, and then there was a conference in the study. I guess it was for like certain members would get a ticket to the study hotel, and like they would like.
Oh, yes, that's right. Okay.
Yeah. So we were like talking after that, and I was just like, I don't understand like why more students don't volunteer for this. Like, it's like, a great learning experience, and you learn a lot, and like you learn like what was good and like what could have been improved, and like who was a great speaker to have on, and like who maybe you should have reconsidered, or like what foods really like hit it off and what foods didn't. So just stuff like that, it was like interesting to see and be able to be a part of, especially as like a first year student, because you were around kids who had done it before. But yeah, so it was my first time seeing it, and it was crazy how they like transformed the space, because we would walk into class and it would just be like this small little space, and then there were like vendors everywhere, and like pig roasts going, like not a pig roast, but like beef like being cut, and then the pastries being like presented and stuff. And I was like, oh my gosh, I can't get this water outside. Let me through.
Were there any panels or anything that really like spoke to you that was one of your favorites that stuck out? Because I really enjoyed it would have been a million years ago, but there was a panel on the death of fine dining that I thought was super interesting. So you had a lot of, food writers and just having a moderated discussion on, kind of like what that means. Because I mean, even Paul, you were speaking about, teaching a fine dining class, that it's, I think it's not that fine dining is dead, but I think the definition of it has changed to where, you're not really seeing the white tablecloth anymore, but the level of service will always remain at like particular restaurants that strive to be that, 5-star level of service. So I just thought it was
Yeah,
fascinating.
there was one, and okay, there you go. I was looking up the word because I didn't want to like mispronounce it or say the wrong thing. But there was one that a woman spoke about, and I think she was like some type of nutritionist or like a doctor, and she talked about like unami and like the history behind unami, and basically why like a lot of people don't enjoy the taste of unami, because like the five, or I guess is it five tastes? Yeah, I guess there's five tastes, and like umami is one of them. So I thought that was really interesting, like the cultural history behind it, and like why people like have a thing against it, or like why people enjoy it more. I thought that was really interesting. And then like an event professional came in, Sarah Zahn, with All About Events, and she kind of like she talked about her story, and so I learned more about like her company and stuff. And I really enjoyed that, because like that's what I would love to do one day. So I really enjoyed listening to her, and like how she kind of built her company up from like helping friends in college to now like having a citywide company that like people know in the whole region. So I just really enjoyed like sitting in on the few that I like sat in on. We were working a lot of the time, but like I enjoyed that too. So
I like that you threw that in at the end.
yeah, so it was fun.
Paul, did you have any, what is 2022 going to look like? I know we're tiptoeing through 2021 and hopefully looking forward to 2022. Is it starting to be pieced together, or is it more a wait and see approach? Because I know as far as event planning goes, it's obviously been a roller coaster. So we're feeling more confident. We're talking about vaccinations. We're, requiring proof of vaccinations. We're, masking up again. So I know there's a lot of policy and procedure that can now be implemented that we didn't have 6 to 9 months ago. And so I think a lot of us are a lot more optimistic about next year because of where we're headed. So what's kind of the approach for 2022?
So we did have an event last month on July 14th. We had Mashama Bailey and Jono Morisano. They came in. I'll do a plug real quick if that's okay. But they came in last month, and we did a panel discussion regarding their book, Black, White, and the Gray. And, the one thing we did with the chef conference, in order to, a couple of years ago, we just, Mike had said something about like maybe expanding it, but, we didn't want to do like a spring and a fall one or anything like that. But we did feel like it was beneficial for us anytime anybody had something come out that would be a part of the chef conference, but it just happened to be the timing didn't work. Why don't we just throw a series talks, right? So part of the chef conference series was this talk that we had last month. This was July 14th. And at that point, we were like, all right, everyone's doing it. Like, we're being cool. Everyone's getting the vaccinations. We're showing great numbers. Numbers are super low.
So this was an in-person event in July.
Yes. And this was, for a lot of people, a lot of, the mask mandate at Drexel had been lifted.
Mm-hmm.
We
And
had
I think a lot of us were comfortable
given
being
full
indoors,
go-ahead.
unmasked, fully vaccinated.
Absolutely.
All the events I met Grace at for NACE were indoors. We just weren't concerned until
Right. Until
late July, early August, and we're like, oh boy, here we go again.
The what variant? And we literally a week prior, we were still scheduled to have it outside, which I was so thankful we didn't, because it was a day just like today, 94 degrees with humidity and dew points, and the real feel is 108. So once we got that go ahead, we breathed a sigh of relief, and no pun intended, but we're able to do it without masks, and it was cool. That was 6 weeks ago.
Yeah, it's crazy
right?
how fast this has turned.
Right. So I hate to use another overused term, but it's, the situation is fluid, and we're just, we're tiptoeing. We got our fingers crossed, and we're bated breath. We're hoping for the best. And, as of right now, we're shooting for the February 28th, the end of February. That's where we're at right now. Nothing has been announced. So, we're looking for the same time period. We are looking for the same typical format. We will not do it virtually. We decided that, especially when the time came for the chef conference this past year, people were just zoomed out. And
Zoom fatigue is real.
Yeah, Zoom fatigue was real. And we couldn't do it. And on top of that, that's when we talk about, I'm sure you discussed it before, but when you talk about events and event personnel and the resources and all the people that you need, forget the materials, the people that you need to put together the space and to be responsible for all of these moving parts. From a technological standpoint, that requires a whole other set of hands in addition to the people you need to put together the events. We just felt like that was not something we could really entertain or take on ourselves. It was just too much. So hopefully.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. I was just gonna say, hopefully, it's gonna.
I feel like it kind of takes away the whole food aspect of it. It's the Philly Chef Conference. Yes, you want to hear from people, but you also want to hear what they're talking about. And a lot of what they talk about is how food coincides with what world problem there is, or what they want to focus on, or why they're focusing on this type of cuisine. And I feel kind of bringing it online kind of defeats the purpose. I've learned we've done a couple of things with the club that we started with Drexel Hospitality Society, and it is really hard to get a lot of foodies involved in events that don't have that food element or that don't have that interactive element, just because even if you are an introvert, I'm somewhat of an introvert, and it's hard being an introvert in this kind of industry, but we still like to have that side of the food. We still like to have that side of meeting people. Even if you are a little bit of introverted, if you're in this industry, you still do enjoy some aspect of the industry. And I feel in taking away the food element, or in taking away that personal element, it does kind of take away what the industry is all about.
And you don't have that chance to host. I think, all of us as hospitality professionals, we just want to take care of our guests, our, whoever it is, we want to take care of them. And it's, not impossible, but it's just a different feeling and situation if you're doing it virtually versus in person. And so especially for the Drexel staff and the students to just welcome and host these local, regional, national, international, chefs and other hospitality professionals, you're not getting the chance to do that. And I can see where it's just impossible to translate into a virtual world. And I really applaud you for making the decision to be like, yeah, we're just not going to do it. Like,
Yeah.
there's just not
Yeah.
everything has to go virtual. You can just hold off and just wait and, and do it right when it is safe to do so.
Right. And I have enough technological issues that already take place in person here that I don't need somebody to not know how to turn off their cat filter. And then they're kind of looking on their keyboard.
I'm not a cat. I'm a lawyer.
I'm not a cat.
I've never laughed so hard at anything in my life.
And I wish I could say that that's the only time that I saw that throughout the Zoom pandemic actually occur, like unintentionally, and like just sitting there going, oh man, this hurts to watch. And not that any hospitality professional would ever fall victim to something like that, but you're talking about varying degrees of people who know how to work their equipment. And even though you're able to give them the finest detailed instructions, as meticulous as you can be, things are going to happen. Someone's getting a snowstorm. Texas was knocked out of power, right? So here we are, we have a keynote speaker, and they just so happen to be power's out, and like it did not seem like variables we wanted to mess with.
Well,
so yeah, we're looking forward to it.
So when the conference happens in late February of 2022, what I'm sure you'll probably continue to have panels on like the future of our industry, how so many different places have had to get creative, as well as trying to break down, the toxicity of our industry, as well as, starting to address a lot of the mental health issues that take place within our industry. What does the future look like? And, do you have any resources that you recommend to any bars or restaurants out there that might need them in terms of breaking down toxicity or focusing on mental health?
Yeah, no, excellent questions. So I think the one thing that it forced everybody to do, as we all very well know, is it kind of forced us to stop. I was going to say before, one of the major things that I had to kind of reset my focus on every once in a while when I felt like a little too overburdened with being at home so much is, oh my God, I'm home. I'm with my family, and I'm safe, and everything's okay. I didn't have an Ellen DeGeneres sized personal gym, or the things that all the celebrities would be like, just stay home, and be like, that's so cute for you to say. Nothing patronizing about that at all. Can you sing Imagine again, please?
My home office, has been unusable pretty much the entire pandemic. We had water come through the ceiling, and it's been a whole thing. So my home gym was like this much in between my bed and my closet. So
yeah. So that was like
what you have.
I didn't, thankfully, I wasn't on that end of the spectrum, but I also was not on the end of like, oh my gosh, I'm healthy and we're okay. And you know what? This is forcing me the time to stop and to actually, enjoy the time with the kids, and also to teach them a valuable lesson about resilience and perseverance. And say, we got stuck just a couple weeks ago. We went to Florida in July when it was still safe. We took Spirit.
Let's be honest, I don't think Florida was ever safe.
Yeah. And we went to we were part of that wave of Spirit cancellations.
I don't think I heard about that.
Beginning of that terrible, no good, bad week that Spirit had, and over 2,000 some odd cancellations.
Oh wow!
And we were canceled last minute. We had to find a hotel last minute. I mean, they delayed us twice, and then they just canceled us and said, "Go collect your bags. Call or contact us online to rebook your trip." Bye.
Were you stuck in Florida at that point? Like, were you already? Oh wow!
We were stuck.
This is your flight to get home.
Yeah, flight to come home, and we went to the baggage carousel. My wife called and booked one of the last hotel rooms in the cruise district of Fort Lauderdale, and like a Holiday Inn Express, right? And they're like, sure, like wherever. I can't sleep in the airport. Flights to Philly were canceled for 3 more days, etc. The next flight out was like $2,000 a person. Like,
Oh.
so we were able to book a flight to Atlantic City for 6 a.m. We got to the airport at 3:34, and like people are camped out, still sleeping on the floor. We waited online for 3.5, 4 hours, almost missed the flight. I sprinted to go get it because we were waiting online for so long. So again, that was really long-winded, but again, taking that as an opportunity to show the kids, like, listen, I know this sucks, but there's nothing we can do about it right now. And surely starting a fight, screaming, stomping, doing something is not going to help the situation. So we have to persevere, you have to be resilient. And then when you get through that part, then you can look back and be like, man, that sucked. But when you do it during the time, like, we all know this sucks right now. There's nothing you can do about it. You just got to get through it. So I think that was one of the better lessons we were able to give the kids and spend the time with them. So
Did you once you got back to your home in South Jersey, did you then lock yourself in the car and scream as loud as you possibly could to just get it all out?
Well, our car was still at the Philly International, and we flew into Atlantic City. So then we had to book a car service because all the rented cars were all sold out. So we had to book like a last-minute car service. He was so nice. He was such a nice gentleman. His driving was suspect.
Okay, well, I tell you what, I feel like everybody became either more impatient or worse drivers during the pandemic, but it just, something changed out there on the roads that it's pretty terrifying. And even being a pedestrian, walking through South Philly, it just seems to be a lot of impatience and a lot of horn honking unnecessarily and a lot of just intense behaviors. And, I keep saying that this last year and a half really brought out the best and the worst in people, that you either went one of two directions. You're either improving humanity or making it worse. And so I, obviously pride myself on the ones who are being friends with and having guests that are improving humanity. But I'll circle. I hate to say circle.
I never answered your original questions. I'm so sorry.
I just went on a totally tangent. Happens. You had to let it out about your Florida experience.
The changes in hospitality.
You get what you pay for, Paul.
Exactly.
I'm always terrified to fly those low budget airlines because I am a firm believer in a get what you pay for situation. And we were kind of faced with that conundrum when planning our honeymoon a couple of years ago, because we were definitely going to go to Iceland, and WOW Airlines had just launched. So when you've got an option of, a $600-700 plane ticket on Iceland Air that's been around for forever, that you can also do a free layover in Reykjavik and then go to any, mainland Europe city, or spend $99 going from BWI to Reykjavik. And I'm like, you know what? No, it's my honeymoon. I do not want to get what you pay for situation on my honeymoon. So this is one time where I'm not budging. So Thank you to everyone who donated to our honeymoon fund.
Yes.
And help pay for that more expensive.
It's the same reason why I'll never stay in a hostel ever again. Like I'll never ever go to a hostel. I don't have to.
Well, because you're over 30. Like
Right. There's so many reasons. But no, I think that's,
we'll go back to the
truth.
So I'll bring us back to the updates in the industry, changes in the industry, future in the industry.
So I think a lot of people are, there's been a lot of business models that have they've been able to, dare I say again, pivot. There are some people that did it well. There are some people that just said, nope, I can't and I won't. And some people have the luxury of being able to close for some time. Some people just closed outright and just left, right? I know, seeing a lot of hospitality professionals, whether they be in the beverage, especially in the beverage field, a lot of people are just relocating now and just maybe even getting out of the industry for good. This opens up a number of different avenues for people who are up and coming. One of the pep talks I tried to give prior to us shutting down for 2 weeks to the students is I said, you're going to be on the ground floor of something that nobody has experienced, like, literally since like, I don't know, 1919,
Yeah, 100
maybe in the
years.
50s, maybe in the 50s, polio, maybe. Other than that, nobody knows how to navigate this, and you're going to be on the ground floor of this and be able to come up with the answers, right? And that's what it's about, being resourceful. And it's not so much about having the right answer, it's about being resourceful and how to try to find the right answer and navigate through that, as opposed to just throwing your hands up and go, I don't know. And, you know, I think a lot of people have been able to do that. And those that have been able to do that, they're going to be, you know, there's a lot of people who are just very excited to open back up. Now that we've had time to reset, mental health is definitely going to be something that is, you know, addressed, hopefully. I think the change starts with more of the metropolitan area hospitality establishments, and then hopefully it is able to transcend and work its way throughout. I think what is going to be challenged are a lot of the days of the, you know, I work 90 hours a week, but I only punch in for 60 of those. I think that's going to be more challenge, more so than ever. And, you know, as we were talking earlier prior to recording, business models are going to be changed. Like Bobby Stuckey out in Boulder, Colorado, has Frasca, a fine dining restaurant, that he doesn't look at being a restaurant worker as like a, you know, oh, I'm getting my degree at University of Colorado, so I just need a quick job. But he looks at the restaurant industry as a career, so pay them like they're in a career. Provide them with benefits like it is a career. Mark Vetri, that's when I worked for Vetri, and when I was at Osteria, they started a 401k. They started a health insurance for us, you know, and I had Jeff Benjamin on one of my Zoom classes, and I thanked him there, and I was like, by the way, like, you were ahead of the curve in kind of starting that and treating it like it is a career, as opposed to, you know, because you get the question all the time from guests, like, so what do you really do? I work here. Like, no, I know you work here, but like, what do you do? Like, no, this is what I do. Why?
Like, are you an actor? Are you a musician?
Right, exactly.
You know,
clearly not. but they you know, it takes the owners and proprietors to take it much more seriously, and then to offer that platform as a career. So Bobby Stuckey is continuing that. After 90 days of employment, you are eligible for benefits. He has established a point system for tipping, where it's a whole house tipping pool now. So that means back of house and front of house are on a point system of getting tipped. Therefore, you know, cooks are getting wages that are near $20. That is mind-blowing to think about, but also mind-blowing to think about, why did it take so long for us to get here? There's going to be some pushback. Food prices are going to go up.
and that's, we've already seen that, like food prices are going up. You know, I know that
supply chains are messy.
There's a lot of folks that have decided to leave the industry altogether because, you know, they realize that they didn't want that lifestyle anymore, being at home, that it's, you know, whether it's going back to school or doing something different. And, you know, it's been really heartbreaking to see the internet trolls coming out, you know, against concepts that so many of us are so approving of, for, you know, the proof of vaccination for certain, you know, bars and restaurants here in Philadelphia, that you know, jealous of some of the other cities that are requiring it. But it sounds like vaccination numbers are going up ever since they made the announcement here in Philadelphia a couple of weeks ago. So I think we're heading in the right direction, but there's always going to be the naysayers. So I really appreciate the trailblazers who are willing to put themselves out there, and, you know, always happy to support their businesses.
And I will say, as like a last note, when you talk about like resources who you could go to, you know, there's so many different people. I mean, you could get oversaturated and overwhelmed with how much information there is out there. I think, you know, one thing that a lot of restaurants, event and lodging has been able to kind of turn to are different organizations. One in particular that comes to mind A good friend of mine, Ben Fletcher, who is head of the Philadelphia chapter of PRLA. He's been instrumental in just like, I know, like, yeah, you can type in Google, I need this, and like you have this array of answers. You can go, you know, he can literally direct you to all of those particular resources if you are somebody who is either in the industry or owns a restaurant or whatever the case may be. Whatever facet you are in the industry, they have all the information you need, whether it is about the COVID itself, what the state is saying, what the state is mandating, down to the mental health, who to seek out, where to start there, as opposed to just trying to go out there in the woods, figuring it all out yourself. They have all the resources and links. So things such as that are extremely valuable for people in the industry to seek that out prior to just running out scattershot, right?
Going down that rabbit hole.
Yeah.
Well, the last question I wanted to ask the both of you, what's your favorite venue? So Grace, I mean, you're not even old enough to drink yet. So I don't, I know I was always a fan of restaurants even before I was 21, but you've gotten a chance to work with Lauren. You've probably seen some venues around Philadelphia. You probably have some favorites back in Maryland, but from each of you, like, I'd love to know what your favorite venue is.
Yeah, so with Lauren, I got to like explore a lot of different venues. We would go on venue visits. So that was like one of my favorite parts of working with her, because I like was able to meet different industry professionals and like see all these different venues that hopefully like we would do events at, or we would do weddings at. So one of my favorites, Sue, I want to say her last name right, Sue Connernan, or I'm not sure what her last name is. Maybe cut that part out. But her name's Sue, and Sue introduced me to One North Broad, and it used to be like a masonry place, like for like the masons to come and like meet and stuff like that. And she told us about all the history of it and everything like that. And I just really liked it because it was different from like other spaces I had seen. And there's like different spaces like, oh, you can get married in this hall. Oh, you can have like, I think during COVID, they were having like an acoustic guitar night. So people would come in and like play acoustic guitars, and they would have like all these candles on the ground, and like people would just come and listen to the music. Like I thought that was really interesting, but I just really liked it because it seemed like it like evokes a type of like timelessness and class and elegance that I really enjoyed. And it kind of reminded me of like the show like Bridgerton, like it kind of like reminded me of that. Like it just reminded me of like this like old but like soulful place that I just really enjoy. Like I don't know if I would have my own wedding there, or if like people like it for that kind of stuff, but
Oh, it's a very popular wedding venue. My friends were supposed to get married there in May of 2020, push it to May of 2021. They ended up eloping in November of 2020, but they are still planning May 2022 at One North Broad. It's a very interesting venue. I definitely agree with all your points.
Yeah, it's beautiful. And like I think like they like their hospitality as well is a big part of it. Like Sue is very inviting. And I think they have like a security guard there and stuff, and you can like take tours of it. So even if you're interested just going in to like learn about the history of it, I would definitely recommend that because it's very interesting. And they have like the big Benjamin Franklin statue that's kind of creepy, but it's also very cool.
And then Paul, what about you?
Favorite.
Yeah, so One North Broad is definitely one that came to mind. It's thinking of like really amazing venues. I'm also a big fan of. I love the fact that the city has, whether it be the art museum, whether it be the Franklin Institute, even the Police Touch, and one that especially comes to mind that I went to a wedding to, the Mutter Museum is another. The fact that these museums also host a lot of these different events, actually through Drexel, I should probably also say, the natural science, the natural histories, science, yes, I'm losing my words. But anyway, a lot of these museums, it's really cool because it becomes interactive too. So, that was the one thing about the museum, the Mutter Museum. event that I went to, the dining, like the hall itself was just this old, I mean, all of the mill work, the old wood was just, something that harkened back to the 19th century. And it was just, it was, had that kind of regal element to it. But then you were invited to just go check out the exhibits too. So, if you didn't want to watch other people dance poorly, you could go off.
Look at the medical oddities.
Yes, like, sure, I'd rather be looking at that than try to watch somebody navigate the cha-cha slide, right? But I really enjoy the fact that they're able to do a lot of those, whether it be the Art Museum, Franklin Institute especially. I'm also a fan of, some of the event venues in town that have, like 19 is one, and I know View 150 is another, that give you an opportunity to have, spectacular views of the city and just kind of take you away, like literally take you away from everything else and kind of give you that spot too. So those are probably a couple that come to mind for sure.
Awesome. Well, can you let our listeners know how they can follow you? Paul, I think you have decided to not participate in social media anymore, which I am kind of jealous of. But
I am declawing Mark Zuckerberg's talons from. I do have. It's a personal account that I vet a lot. But yeah, when it comes to following the Philly Chef Conference, that's the handle, Philly Chef Conference. And we do a lot of our announcements and, of course, link in bios for ticket sales, etc. It's fairly bare bones. It's not anything that's too crazy, and we don't overpost. And also Drexel FHM would be another. So Drexel Food.
So food and hospitality management. Okay.
Drexel
And then Grace, what about you?
Yeah, so Drexel started a hospitality program, like not a program, I should say, a society. They already had a program. We started Drexel Hospitality Society. So just a few of us wanted to get a few students together outside of the classroom. So you can find Drexel Hospitality Society if you're a Drexel student or someone that's interested in speaking to Drexel students at Drexel_hospitality. And then I have a personal account that kind of just for events that I do or events that I help with. And it's just called Eye to Actuality, like your eye, for a hopeful event company I hope to own in the future. So fingers crossed, but
such a go-getter. I love her attitude. That's like when I met her, I'm like, oh man, she reminds me so much of myself, except she knew she wanted to go into event planning at a much earlier age than I did. So.
Well, you figured it out, and
I figured it out. Took me a little time, but
well, I told you, I was like, you're the first person I know that does this, and I think it's amazing. So
I mean, once you think that you're going to spend the rest of your life in the beer industry and then you become gluten intolerant, it's time to figure out something else. So
yeah, that's true. That's true.
Who needs a pandemic to pivot? Just some dietary restrictions. Well, I'm so glad you guys were able to join me today. This was fantastic. Listeners, thanks for tuning in. Please follow Beyond the Venue podcast on Instagram and check us out on all of your favorite podcast streaming platforms. Have a great day.